I'm Luana Rubin from Equilter.com, and I'm here at the 2013 Quilt Festival in Birmingham, UK. And we are here with Mary Fisher in her exhibit, and she's going to tell us about her work, her quilts, and her artistic process. And we're standing in front of this gorgeous quilt, which I think really expresses your work with HIV-positive women in Africa. Could you tell us about that?
I work with women in Africa because I found that when I went to Africa, I had a tremendous bond with all of these women. I mean, we both carry the same virus, and so we're like sisters. Mm. And to me, these are the mothers and the sisters who really keep the community going, because without them, it wouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. So I realized once medication was available, they needed to have employment, and they needed to feel better about themselves and be able to feed their children and send them to school. So I started a project with the jewelry to teach them how to crochet and how to bead, and using actually Western beads because of the quality and the consistency, but my designs. Mm-hmm. And then they take the designs and get local beads, and then I let them, they sell them there, and they make even more money. Mm. But they are my family. Mm.
And you've written about your journey in your book. You mentioned when you spoke the other evening about you're not a victim, you're a messenger. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this is my second autobiography, believe it or not. When I went to write the first one, I was actually literally dying and wanted to have something that my children would remember and would have when I was gone, so that they would read, because when I was first diagnosed, they were very small and they lost their father, and so I was what they had. And then I realized that because there was no medication at the time for me, that I needed to leave them something. But then a few years ago, I realized that I'm not dying, I'm living, and need to reevaluate what it is I'm saying, not only to them, but to other women, and to, especially women, but men as well, but to the world, and have a platform to say what I feel about anger and forgiveness and discrimination and stigma. And I use books, I use my art, I use the jewelry to get my message out.
Well, let's look at another piece of your art and continue the story about the message.
Okay.
Mary, your quilts are so powerful and so evocative, and the influence of Africa is very obvious. Can you tell us about your quilts and your art process?
Absolutely. My process is a very direct process. It's a very it's just an emotional process. I spend a lot of time block printing, thermofax printing on fabrics, and I and then when I get a lot of fabric, I cut it up and put it together. So I do it. Real quilters call piecing, but for me, it's just putting it together. Yeah. And then I'll add things to it. I add words to it because that's a way of getting my message out. I embellish. I applique. I'll do just about everything that I can possibly do on a quilt, but to give it some life. And then I'm a long arm quilter. Oh, so wow. Then I put it on a big machine and quilt it myself.
Wow.
I'm not very good on the finishing part, but I do have people that help me do that. The edges, because I'm not so good on that. But I love the process. I love the process of putting it together and of making the pieces. And the African influence for me is the pictures that I use and the faces that I use. Those all come from my photographs.
And the colors.
Well, I guess it is the colors. I don't know. I don't even think about it. It just is there.
Right.
And it just happens that way.
Yeah.
And I guess it is. It's an African influence, but it's just sort of Well, now I live in Sedona, and I have those colors too. So whatever colors, it's such a wonderful thing to be able to use color and to say, yeah, that's African, and yeah, that reminds me, and it makes me feel good when I look at them when they're finished.
Great. And I'm just curious, do you work on one quilt at a time to the finish, or several over a long period of time? All, going from one quilt to the next.
Well, it actually depends on if I have a show coming up or if I'm just experimenting. A lot of times I like to work in a series. So when I get a certain series of fabrics that are similar, and then I'll put different images on top of them, that becomes a series. So therefore I work in a series. So not just one quilt usually, except for some of these, it was one at a time.
Okay.
But all the it's one at a time when you put it together. But it's working on the fabrics all at once.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression I had.
Yeah.
Well, you have a special quilt that you'd like to tell us about. Let's go over there and have a look.
Okay, great.
So we're here with a couple of your favorite quilts, and can you just tell us about your inspiration here?
When I first went to Africa, I used my camera and took pictures of the faces and the children and the women and the moms and just the people, because I wanted to have them. I didn't know if I'd be going back. I wanted to, but I didn't know. So that was what struck me when I got home, is the eyes and the faces. And the truth is, for people that have so very little, they have such incredible joy in their lives. This particular quilt, the story about it, it's representational, certainly, because I don't know about this little boy exactly. But when I was there one time, I was handed a baby from a mom who had just died in a hospice. It was just a remarkable experience. And I thought, I have to take this baby home, and I named him Bupe, which it means gift. And I said, well, I better go home. I started the paperwork. I better go home and talk to the children just make sure they're all right with this. And then several weeks later, as I was getting things ready, we didn't know if he was HIV positive, but he passed away. So it was all very, so emotional. Like I really felt like I was losing my own child. And so it's all of these children are representative of the fact that aren't all children our children?
Yes.
And
yes.
don't we have that kind of responsibility? So,
absolutely.
So in my heart and in my mind, this one is just special to me.
Yes. Yeah. And I would also like you to tell us about your book, because we're going to carry this book at Equilter.
Which I'm very excited about.
Yes, me too. And just tell us a little about the book.
Abataka, which means, actually it's a Pan-African term, and it means community. It means we are one and we take care of each other. And so we have to do for each other. And so I named it Abataka, and it is the story of my quilts, some sculpture, mostly quilts, and it talks about each quilt, and it talks about a little bit of a story about it and why it means something to me. There's just some of it's fun and some of it's touching, but it's certainly my work.
Well, I can't wait to read it.
Good, thank you. I will give you one.
Well, thank you for your time, Mary.
Thank you, Luana.
And we hope you've enjoyed this interview with Mary Fisher. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.